Hey everyone, welcome to Verse by Verse Bible Teaching. My name is Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and we are going to finish up the fourth chapter of Galatians today. Mike, you got an intro for us?
Yeah, real briefly, what we're going to see, we're going to be covering chapter 4, verses 21 through 31 today. And what we're going to see is that Paul is going to start in and make an allegory here, an extended allegory between Hagar and Sarah. And it's really going to be more of the whole overarching idea is those who trust in the law are slaves rather than sons. And that's kind of what we're going to see here from 21 to 31.
Yeah, it's a really interesting series of passages here, and it's he goes into a lot of allegories we're going to look at here in just a minute. So I guess let's just jump in.
All right. Galatians chapter 4, verse 21. Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? Those who desire to be under the law, in Paul's mind, should be under the law, and they should be listening to the law. For if they are under the law, how come they are not listening to the law? That's kind of his thinking here. Paul is setting up the beginning of an argument here that's going to look at the sons of Abraham, Isaac and Ishmael, and look at them allegorically. Now, it's interesting that Paul is doing this, and that one of the frequent ways people get around what the Bible actually says is begin to take it as allegory. Paul is not doing that, as we'll see. In fact, he's sort of beating mysticism at its own game, you might say. But let's say, like Jewish mystics, for instance, they will often talk about the sod meaning of the Bible. That is the hidden meaning rather than what the text is really saying. Now, oftentimes, that hidden meaning will contradict the plain meaning of the very text that they're looking at. Now, as Christians, I should say, we believe in a historical, logical, coherent approach to the Bible. Though there are different categories of the written word in the Bible, like poetry, prose, speech, etc., as Christians, ultimately we believe that God tells us what he wants us to know, if you will, straight up. We don't have to miss and guess what he's trying to say to us. Now, within mysticism, there is a substantial emphasis on rule-making and rule-keeping because at the end of the day, they hold themselves up to be gods. And one of the ways they try and find reasons for these rules and stuff is through allegorical means. Like I said before, here Paul is sort of beating all of this allegorical hidden and mystical meaning at its own game. He takes Scripture here and makes some really intelligent allegories out of them that's really going to resonate with a Jewish audience. And this is sort of Paul's thinking here throughout the next few verses. And he, of course, starts that idea by saying, tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? Chris?
That's a really good point, and I actually look at that a little bit later too. It's interesting how this idea of allegory, people will see allegory in things and sort of abandon the plain meaning of the text. But what's interesting about the Bible is that it is so rich that it is allegory, certainly, of certain things, but it also is exactly what it says. I think we'll get into that a little bit later. So it says, tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? Ye that desire to be. Speaking to people that were seeking to be under the law, that is, that they had not yet fully realized their goal. This was probably the first rebuke or real rebuke that they had since their beguiling from the false teachers that showed up. And they were teaching these new Gentiles, as we've discussed, that they needed to be circumcised in order to be saved, among other things. They were probably awaiting this letter or some sort of rebuke like it, as it seems that the deceivers had in mind specifically to defame Paul and to paint him as the deceiver in all of this. I'm sure the people there did expect someone to tell Paul about this sooner or later. I say that they were specifically defaming Paul based in part on Galatians 4, verse 16 and 17, where it says, am I therefore become your enemy, because I tell you the truth? They zealously affect you, but not well. Yea, they would exclude you, that ye might affect them. And the whole idea of they would exclude you, this is essentially meaning that they would kind of cut you off from sound teaching like his own. that they might affect them. So this idea that they desired to be under the law is also interesting because the believers in the Galatian churches were primarily Gentile. So it would seem that this letter should have been written primarily to Jewish congregations like the one in Jerusalem. What's interesting about that is that you can see in Acts that the Jerusalem congregation later wrote a letter saying, hey, these people, these false teachers, they weren't preaching stuff that we were saying. They may have come from Jerusalem, but we didn't have anything to do with that, essentially. But anyway, there's a pretty interesting quote from Spurgeon about being under the law, which is what these people were desiring to be. He says, what is God's law now? Is it not above a Christian? It is under a Christian. Some men hold that God's law is like a rod and tererum over Christians and say, if you sin, you will be punished with it. It is not so. The law is under a Christian. It is for him to walk on, to be his guide, his rule, his pattern. Law is the road which guides us, not the rod which drives us, nor the spirit which actuates us. And finally, do you not hear the law? So, and this is what you were mentioning, Paul is about to take these lightweight Bible students to school. He says, you want to be under the law? Well, let's have a little Bible study about that. Mike?
Galatians chapter 4, verse 22. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. Now Abraham did have two sons. One was by the slave woman Hagar, and the other one was by Abraham's wife Sarah. Paul here is beginning in earnest with this allegorical teaching of the Genesis account of Abraham's two sons. Now this is an especially potent metaphor in that the fundamental promise of the Abrahamic covenant is Genesis 17:7. I will to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. On this promise, all of the promises of God rest. It means that God firmly binds himself to his people to be their God, and his grace and goodness and all of his other good things are given in love. Now, as it relates to what Paul is saying here, the ultimate goal of all of God's covenants with humankind is to bring salvation, reconciliation, shalom, that is an all-encompassing peace and prosperity with God. Now, because of this, speaking allegorically about the covenant God makes with Abraham within the context of a Jesus versus Jesus plus the law makes, at least to a Jewish mind, that's going to be a really profound metaphor. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. And I'll leave it there. Chris?
All right. Okay, so what I think is interesting about this is that he's about to talk about these two sons, and the presumption here is that the people really knew their Bible and knew this story very well, and they were Gentiles primarily, so they had not grown up learning the Old Testament like the Jewish believers would have. Yet Paul speaks here with very little detail about the background of the story and these two women and sons. So he believed that they were at least familiar with the story. This should also hopefully convict some of you to get grounded in the Word as well. It's quite likely what you're doing here by listening to this podcast, but I would encourage you not to stop there, but to find more and more things that you can that will edify you in the Word, because it's so inexhaustible. But anyway, I'm going to give you a little bit of background here on this story, just in case you have not heard it yet or don't know all that much about it. Abraham was given a promise by God that he would be the father of many nations. And in fact, that's what his name meant, father of many nations. And this prophecy was given to him when he was old, but not really that old. Do you know what the age was? I should have done the research on this. It's probably like 70 or something like that. And I don't know, 80 something. Anyway, that's really bad. But years went by. You can imagine as the years went by, he would tell people his name, and they would ask, oh, cool, like how many children do you have? And he would say none. And then he would, of course, his name being father of many nations. But eventually his wife, Sarah, who had gotten past the childbearing age herself, decided that she would help God to fulfill this promise. And she suggested that Abraham take her servant Hagar and have a child with her. After this child was born, they named him Ishmael, and he lived about 14 or so years Then Sarah and Abraham were visited by some angels that told them that Sarah was going to have a child, Sarah, who is now very old. And she laughed, and that is why the child was named Isaac, because Isaac means laughter. After this incident, where there was an incident anyway, where Ishmael mocked Isaac, Sarah had Hagar and Ishmael sent away. And that seems a little cruel, but it's also interesting to note that they were sent away not without a huge monetary inheritance from Abraham, who was a very rich man at the time. So one of his sons was a bondmaid, and one was a free woman. Paul will now show the many ways in which this story reveals the nature of the two covenants of law and grace. Mike?